What's up, everyone? Good morning and welcome to Shaw Locals Bears Insider Podcast. I am Kyle Nabors along with Sean Hammond. And Sean, you know, we're going to dive right in this week. We got a lot to get to. A big Bears win that I don't think really anyone saw coming on Monday Night Football, particularly in that fashion. But before we really get into that, let's start with the news of the week. With the Robert Quinn trade, and let's start with your reaction. Did you think the Bears got enough for Robert Quinn?
I do. I think that is a good deal. I mean, you're talking about a guy who has a lot of money on that contract, and I know the Bears are going to eat some of that as part of this deal. But I mean, you're talking about what is he? 32 years old, pass rusher with one sack. I mean, I know he's probably your highest value trade chip. Assuming that Roquan is off the table or some of those other guys. If you're gonna make a trade, he's the obvious choice. And I think that I don't know that the value was much higher than a 4. I don't know that you could have got a 3, and particularly because of the money and how much Robert Quinn is owed for the rest of this season and on the rest of that contract.
Yeah, I agree. You look at what the Rams gave up last year to get Von Miller. The Bears weren't getting that. I thought if Robert Quinn came out and had a really good start to this season, I think that maybe they got a third for him, but he needed to perform like he did last year, and that was really not what I expected. I expected some regression. Um, so I thought a fourth was pretty fair. I thought maybe the more interesting part of everything that happened was actually the opportunity for the public to see kind of the reaction, the Roquan Smith getting caught off guard, literally finding out while he was talking to the media. Um, was a good reminder, I think, to people about the human side of this business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk in sports about trades and all the time, and guys get traded all the time, especially baseball and basketball. Those sports are trading like crazy, and the NFL trade deadline isn't quite as much of an event, but still, you're talking about Robert Quinn has to pick up his life and move to Philadelphia, and he had to start doing that in a day. He was with the Eagles the very next day, and I'm sure he's got to sell a house or do whatever he has to do to get his stuff in order. And then, you have his teammates who he's worked with every single day for the last 2.5 seasons, like Roquan, who are going to miss this guy. And Robert Quinn is a guy who is really, or I should say, was really well respected in this Bears locker room when he was a member of the Bears. Just the way he approaches every single day, that attitude. Everybody talks about his positive attitude and the way that he doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. And I think a lot of the young players like Dominique Robinson, like Travis Gibson, they see that and they see how Robert is, how he's projecting himself every single day, and they see what a pro looks like. And that was really important for those young guys. And I think that was a really important thing just for this team who got rid of a lot of veterans on that defense, got rid of Khalil Mack, got rid of Danny Trevathan. He was one of those last guys remaining. I spoke with Eddie Jackson yesterday, and briefly, it was quick, right before they kicked us out of the locker room. And yeah, I mean, those guys are bummed. Rob was somebody who they really liked being teammates with. And you saw that in Roquan's reaction in that moment.
But I think the thing that stands out about that too, and is a good sign for the culture in the Bears locker room currently, is there was clearly like the guys were upset. They lost a friend to a trade and stuff like that, but they understood the business aspect and the idea of what the Bears are doing. There does seem to be a good understanding right now between the players, the coaching staff, and the front office what the plan is moving forward for this team. Um, and that's a good thing. I mean, that's a great thing. It's something that I at least personally worried about a little bit. Like when you have a new GM that comes in and he starts making changes, and you're purposely being bad, and particularly before this week, I know this is a small thing, but that trade coming after having a really good game, I think actually helps the culture of the locker room a little bit more. Like if they're continuing to really struggle and then you lose a veteran leader as well, can kind of snowball a little bit. So I think the timing of that trade came at the best possible time after a win in the fashion that the Bears had on Monday night.
Yeah, and I think if you're a Bears fan, and I know I've got lots of them in my mentions and stuff, some of whom are upset about this trade, but if you're a Bears fan, you should be. It's promising the way that Ryan Poles has looked toward the future, and this is just another example of doing that. You're probably going to cut Robert Quinn next offseason if you don't trade him. So why not get something in return? Why not get any sort of draft pick that you can? And I think a 4th-round pick is a fair value. And to your point, Kyle, Alan Williams, the defensive coordinator, came out the other day and said, something to the effect of like, this is when Robert gets traded, it's not business as usual. These guys are going to miss him. And Allen was like, I hate when coaches say, oh, it's business as usual, next man up, whatever. It's not. This is a guy that they really liked, and it sucks for those guys in the locker room that their friend and teammate is gone. But you like to see that humanizing aspect from a coaching staff, and certainly they understand what's at play here. They understand the long game, and this is going to give opportunities for Travis Gibson and Dominique Robinson and some of those other Al-Qadim Muhammad, some of those other pass rushers to go out and prove themselves. And yes, it might make Alan Williams' job a little bit tougher because you're losing your best pass rusher. But in the long term, this is the move that I think Ryan Poles needed to make. And I think he maximized his value for Robert Quinn.
Yeah, so Marengo Guns is the official sponsor of Shaw Local's Bears Insider podcast. Marengo Guns, always buying, always paying top dollar for your guns, ammo, and military items. Come see the experts at Marengo Guns, open 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week. And of course, you can find all of our content at shawlocal.com. You can find Sean on Twitter at Sean_Hammond. You can find myself on Twitter at Kyle Nabors. And usually on a typical week, you'll find us here previewing games at 9:30 a.m. on Fridays, with the Bears really on a schedule here where they'll be playing at noon pretty much on Sunday throughout the rest of the season outside of the Christmas Eve game. That should be our schedule. Hopefully early in the week, we'll be recapping each week too. Had some conflicts this week, weren't able to get together. But if you do join us at 9:30 live, we do appreciate it. It's great. Everyone that's in the comments, we're going to get to those, start breaking those down in a bit. If you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. It helps people find the show. It helps us build the channel. So we really do appreciate that. And like I said, with that, I'm going to jump into some of these comments here and work our way down. Rick Gonzalez, a regular here on the show, said, I think the 10 million cap space for next year is more important than the 4th-round pick. I would normally agree with that, Rick, but the Bears already have so much money. I'm not sure it matters for next year. Maybe the cap space down the road, but they were going to be able to do whatever they wanted in this offseason, regardless of if they had traded Robert Quinn or not, I think.
Think about how many deals they have to make to fill $110 million in cap space. I mean, that is so much money. That is an amount of cap space that we rarely see in the NFL for one offseason. And I'm not too worried about that if 10 million.
If you're spending that much money in one NFL offseason in free agency, it's usually going to blow up in your face. So, it's good that they have that maneuverability, that they can go out and target top tier guys and try and build some depth. But you don't really want them to go out and just blow all that money.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Kyle, but I don't expect Ryan Poles to look at it that way. I don't think he's gonna go out. It wouldn't surprise me if they still have some of that money left over when they get through March next year.
Because absolutely.
Just because you have the space doesn't mean you necessarily should spend it all in one off season. There's you have to evaluate each and every free agent class on its own. And I don't know that there's going to be $100 million that you want to spend. I mean, look, it hasn't really worked out for the Jaguars, all that money that they've spent, and they're still sort of scuffling through this season.
Yeah, NFL teams that spend a ton of money in free agency, it typically doesn't work all that well. I mean, it's not that it can't, but you got to be targeted. You don't want to get back to what the kind of the Ryan Pace where you're using free agency to fill the gap where you missed in your draft classes. That's where things go downhill quickly.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that that unused money can roll over into next year. So if you say you spend $80 million next year, you still got $20 million that you're going to roll over to the following year, and then you got a little bit of a leg up on your competition.
So Alan Dunlap says over 100 million in cap space can build both offensive and defensive lines. Use the draft to build your skill positions. Yeah, I mean, I think that is a really good idea, and I think that is a way that the Bears are leaning. You saw that in the draft, I think this year a little bit with the way, not early on, but the way they targeted offensive line in the latter part of the draft, where I think that they were trying to get some depth at that position. And now that they've done that, I think that you will see them try and augment it. Like they have a lot of young guys on the offensive line as they get into free agency, Sean. I'm both sides of the ball, as Alan says. I do think that's where they're going to try and spend some of that money.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have a lot of veterans on this offensive line, especially when Cody Whitehair gets hurt. You basically got him and Lucas Patrick, and I guess Sam Mustipher at this point is considered a veteran. He's a young veteran, maybe. I would expect that they're going to be looking at tackles, whether that's right or left side, whatever you want to do. I would think they want to bring in a veteran on that line, and especially with Robert Quinn gone, this pass rush has not been good when they're trying to rush four. And that's the whole concept of this 4-3 defense that Matt Eberflus brought here is creating pressure with four. And if you're not doing that, that's absolutely a position you have to address in the offseason. It wouldn't surprise me to see them address that in free agency and in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. We're right on there, Sean. Okay, so let's see. Mike here. We're getting a lot of questions. I really do, or comments.
Yeah, guys, keep
really
them coming.
appreciate it. Yeah, it makes our job a lot easier when you guys steer the show for us. When we know what you guys want to talk about, makes it a lot more natural, a lot more fun. So Mike says, is there any connection between freeing up cap space to pay Rowe, obviously referencing Roquan Smith, and trading Robert Quinn, Sean?
I don't think so. Again, just because what we were kind of saying, they have so much cap space already. I imagine that Ryan Poles has sort of already marked $20+ million in his budget next year for that Roquan Smith deal. Whether or not Roquan wants to take it or not, I think is the bigger question. But I don't think that really necessarily affects what happens with Roquan.
Yeah, absolutely. If the Bears have the money to pay Roquan whenever they want to. Trading Robert Quinn wasn't a prerequisite to that. It's just finding a number that they can both agree on, which, as clearly before the season, was an issue. And I very, very much doubt, Mike, that they're going to make or get a deal done in season now with Roquan. I believe, right? He didn't hire anyone like at the beginning.
No, he's still his own agent.
Yeah, so that. It's hard to see them getting a deal done when he's acting as his own agent.
It's like not every time, but almost every time we get to talk to him, including the other day before the Robert Quinn news broke, we were talking with Roquan for maybe 5 or 6 minutes before that whole incident happened. And it seems like every other time somebody's asking about the impending contract situation. And I really believe Roquan when he says that that's not even on his mind. I don't think there's any focus on that during the season. Obviously that's going to change once the season's over, but he is so focused on this season and his responsibilities as a linebacker and as a teammate that he's not going to be focused on that in the season.
I just saw this come in down here. I'm trying to go in order, so I don't. But seeing this made me got to pay Smith, Monty, David Montgomery, and Mooney from a T3P podcast. That's a mouthful for me there. I mean? Well, let's start with Roquan. Yeah, I think the Bears will eventually pay Roquan Smith. I think the sides are going to agree. I do think that Roquan Smith and Matt Eberflus, it seems like the relationship has been steadily improving between him and the coaching staff and the front office. So I think he gets paid. I'm not sure on Monty. I think we've talked about this before. My philosophy tends to be don't pay running backs. And Darnell Mooney, I don't think you're at a point where you have to pay Darnell Mooney yet, Sean.
Well, they probably will want to extend him, but that's also not going to count. I mean, it depends how you structure the contract, obviously, but he's got one more year on his rookie deal. So if he gets an extension, the big money would hit the following year in 24. I would expect them to get a deal done, maybe before next season with Mooney if they do want to keep him. But then again, I kind of said that with David Montgomery last offseason, and that didn't happen. So we're still kind of feeling out how this new front office approaches that.
Yeah, I mean, paying a wide receiver, like I said, it's different than paying
It
a
is
running back,
different
though.
positions for
So, and
sure.
particularly, like, it's I don't know. I expect they're going to want to extend Darnell Mooney. It's right now, in particular, and I don't even know if they've even had these discussions or if Darnell Mooney's looking to get paid yet. So we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves here. But I mean, we've talked about with Hub for how long about like, is Darnell Mooney a one? Is he a 1B? Is he a 2A? Like that. And those things
Hmm.
are going to come into the negotiations. And it's been a slow start for the passing offense. So that kind of complicates things. So I don't expect there to be any Mooney news on the horizon. I wouldn't be too shocked. Like I wouldn't be completely shocked if David Montgomery signed an extension during this season, though.
I wouldn't either. And you know, I try to take everything the GM says with a grain of salt because you have to. There's going to be that coach speak or whatever, but he referenced David Montgomery as being one of his favorite players on the team, and the way that he runs so hard is just so impressive. And I think I don't know that you're going to have to pay all that much for David. I mean, I know we looked at this last offseason and we were thinking something in line with Joe Mixon, but Kyle, I don't know if you agree with this. I mean, the production hasn't been there this season. Has that hurt his value?
Yeah, I think it's hurt his value, and the emergence of Khalil Herbert continues to hurt his value a little bit. Um, I mean, it's such a tough position to get paid at right now because let's face it. I mean, running backs are interchangeable for the most part. So you're not going to pay top dollar. Like the front offices are going to just naturally take a harder line with running backs because you're looking for a combination of guys. You wrote about it, I believe, in Bear Down Nerd Up this week. It was pretty much a 50-50 timeshare between those two guys this week in reference to David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. Um,
In terms of touches, it was
yeah,
close. In
yeah,
terms of snaps, David is still a little bit ahead.
yeah, still a little bit ahead, but it just goes to show, like you've seen that in Green Bay. Like if they can get a deal done, I mean, I got to go back and look at what Aaron Jones was paid with the Packers, but like I think ideally that's kind of the blueprint, though. Particularly with the way Luke Getsy had ran that offense up in Green Bay. You saw how they wanted to use two running backs with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. It's the same thing that want to do with David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. I think it just comes down to the price.
Yeah, it will absolutely come down to the price. I mean, I don't think that Ryan Poles is necessarily going to overspend for a running back. We've seen him be cautious in what he wants to spend. But I also think that David does want to be here, and I think I think they will make an effort to bring him back. You're absolutely right. It's going to come down to that price, and maybe they can structure something that is a little bit easier to get out of after a year, after 2 years, whatever the case may be.
Robert Phillips is saying his pay me celebration, referencing earlier about Roquan Smith when it says different, Sean. I mean, Roquan, trust me, Roquan hasn't forgotten about getting paid. I think
No.
he just understands it's not going to happen. But every time he makes a play like that, that's another thing he can put on film to say, pay me my money. So
He might not be thinking about that right now, but I guarantee after game 17, the following Monday, maybe he'll watch the film on Monday morning, and then, that afternoon or whatever, he's going to flip that switch, and it's going to be about getting the most money he can.
let's see. I'm losing my place here because we've got so many questions. Not complaining
Keep them
about
coming,
that.
guys.
Yeah. So Rick here, I'm sorry, not Rick. Alan with a glad Poles didn't use Pat's win to stray away from his long-term vision. Yeah, I wouldn't expect that at all, Alan. Like this, even with a good win like that, a win that really no one saw coming, particularly in that fashion. Um, Ryan Poles and this coaching staff and this front office know exactly what they have in this Bears team. They're not under any misconceptions of what this roster is.
Yeah, and we talked about it after that Minnesota game where that first half was just absolutely awful, and it's hard to keep the emotions out of it when you're watching a team that you're really invested in, whether you're a fan, whether you're in the front office, whether you work for the team, whatever. And I think Ryan Poles has done a pretty good job of that, and that's like Robert Quinn, we were talking about earlier, don't get too high after the wins, don't get too low after the losses, especially in this year one where Poles is just feeling out what he has and trying to decide who he wants to keep and who he wants to move on from. He can look at this whole season. You don't have to react just to one game.
Jabari with a good morning, fellas. Missing the old man. Hub Arkish. Hope he's getting well. Hub is making progress. Appreciate the thoughts, everyone, on that.
We miss him, especially on this show on Friday mornings.
Yeah, missed the insight there. I'm sure he enjoyed that Bears game on Monday night, though. Let's see what else we got here. I'm gonna jump back down here before I go back up because we sophisticated thoughts. The fact that the Bears have a 2-back rotation with Montgomery won't even have the stats to require a huge contract, would work with the Bears being able to retain him, in my opinion. Sean, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, kind of what I was getting at when I asked you that. I mean, yeah, he's not going to have the type of rushing numbers that he had under Matt Nagy's offense, where he was the clear number one featured back most games when he, other than when he was hurt. So, if you're splitting time, I do think, obviously he has that production in his past that he can point to and he can say to teams, I've done this before. But, given what the Bears are trying to do, given the emergence of Khalil Herbert, they don't necessarily have to invest a ton in a running back because they have a good one under a rookie contract in Herbert. And, if David Montgomery's number is too high, I really just think they're going to let him go.
Well, I think sophisticated thoughts. How do I want to phrase it so it doesn't sound like I'm being a jerk? I think it's too simple to think that teams are looking at the final stat line of a player nowadays. And this is a good time to plug the Bear Down Nerd Up piece that you wrote this week, where you focused a bit on the running back, Sean, because you talked about the advanced metrics in there between Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery, and Khalil Herbert really ranking near the top of the league in a lot of metrics. David Montgomery more in the middle of the pack among qualified running backs. Teams are looking at that, and they're looking at that not just in a one season sample size. They're looking over a couple of years to see what those progressions, what regression is happening with the player. That a lot of that type of stuff, and just looking at the tape, is going to determine how much they value a player at, more than them looking and being like, oh, that guy ran for 1,200 yards and had 60 catches or anything like that, Sean.
Yeah, Khalil Herbert has been extremely efficient. And I think that's why he started to get more snaps and more touches is, he sees a hole and he hits it and he doesn't stray from that. Whereas, it basically the metrics are backing up everything the eye test tells you. Whereas, Khalil's doing that and David is a little bit more trying to break those tackles a little bit shiftier, a little bit more lateral movement on his runs, and the metrics bear that out. And that's not, neither of those is a bad thing. That's just a sign of two different style running backs. And I think when we think about a timeshare at running back or having two running backs, you're often thinking about the big bulldozer guy and then the smaller guy who can catch passes. But I don't think it necessarily needs to be that. If you have two running backs who just have different styles, even though they might be similar in size, they run differently and they both have different skills. We've pointed out how David is clearly a better pass blocker at this point in his career. And that's part of the reason why he's in there on some of those key third downs. And they just have different skill sets. And I think that's what you want when you have two backs.
I mean, you're seeing that a lot around the league, right? I already mentioned Green Bay. You're seeing that in Detroit with DeAndre Swift when he can stay on the field at least, and Jamal Williams. I mean, there's so many instances of that. I mean, going back to the Bears game on Monday night against the Patriots, you're seeing that with Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. Mm-hmm. It's the trend in the NFL. I could go team by team. There's not a lot of places right now where you see just one back. So you're going to continue to see that. And like I said, I think it's the advanced metrics that are going to determine how much David Montgomery is paid, and if the Bears want to be the team that does that.
I'm gonna throw that. Can we throw links in the comments? I don't know if I've never done this before. I don't know if this is gonna
you can
go over as a link, but I'll throw the story on the running backs in there for you guys if anyone wants to check it out.
No, that's actually
Yeah, you might have to copy and paste it. Oh man, it's sent from every. Whoops.
Yeah, just needed to do it from YouTube there, or like change it
Whoops.
from all to YouTube. That's all right. We're all good. Learning as we go here. Let's see.
Learning on the fly.
I'm trying to go back up here. We got so many questions there. Rick, any updates on Pringle and Leatherwood, Sean?
So Pringle's back at practice this week. I don't expect him to be back for the game this week. Just because that's based off what we've seen from some of the other guys coming off injury. It's usually taken him a week or so to really get back. And Pringle, that was a lower leg injury. He wasn't able to really do much movement at all. So I think the cardio is going to be an issue there at least for a week or so. Leatherwood is still practicing. Still on the illness list, so he has not been activated. Obviously, if he's going to play on Sunday, he would need to be activated either today or Saturday.
And Sean, I see Robert saying the link worked for me. I just remembered now after doing the Friday Night Drive live stream for 7 hours on Friday night for IHSA football playoff. I remembered now that just in StreamYard, it doesn't look like it's an active link, but if you actually look at the YouTube chat, it does work. So
cool.
We're all good. So that's where we are with Pringle and Leatherwood. Let's get into some offensive line talk here. Kawhi, regular to the show, says Tevin Jenkins has been our best, most consistent offensive lineman this season, in my opinion, yet he has played the least of the starters. Is there something else going on behind the scenes, Sean?
No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, he is. I mean, I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with that. I mean, he's been out there all season long. He's been at that right guard spot since week one, and I don't think that there's any. I think they like what they have in him as a right guard at this point. That's a new position for him, obviously, and I think they are pleasantly surprised by how he's been able to pick that up. And I agree, he's been one of their best linemen, if not the best.
Yeah, and Rick said Jenkins a beast. Quiet.
He is.
He's been really good. I mean, the metrics bear that out. So I guess Kawhi saying like maybe the he's played the least. It's because maybe he's saying like he's just looking at pure minutes or snaps, and that's the rotation that they were in the first couple weeks.
I guess season. Yeah, you know what, you're right. Yeah, man, this season's feeling long already. The snap share with Lucas Patrick. Yeah, but I mean, since then, since Lucas moved over, once Cody Whitehair got hurt, I mean, Tevin's been the starting right guard the entire time.
Yeah, and I think it's an instance of a young player facing adversity. It's not easy. Like when you're brought in, in the draft pick, and within a year, the regime that drafted you is gone, and you had, let's face it, not a good first year, whether that was because of on-field performance or injuries or a combination. Like, it was clear his stock had tumbled with the team. He didn't react very well to that. That was pretty public. I mean, we saw it spill over publicly, at least. But for whatever reason, it's turned around. There seems to be buy-in now. I think it was just an instance of once he started to get comfortable and started to buy into what he was being told, he's taken off. And I don't expect that to stop. I think that for maybe this wasn't how we envisioned Tevin Jenkins. How this certainly wasn't the path we envisioned for Tevin Jenkins becoming a solid piece of this Bears offensive line. But somehow we got to this point, Sean.
Well, sure, you wanted him to be a tackle when you drafted him, but if you got a starter and you got a really good starter at guard, I mean, that's a win. How many of these draft picks just don't pan out at all, and I think Tevin is trending in that direction. I think he could be a starter at that guard spot for a long time. Maybe down the line, maybe they want to try him out at tackle, but I don't necessarily think that that's where this coaching staff is going with that.
No, if you can solidify one of those interior spot with the guy that, let's face it, I mean, the way things were trending, you were worried was not going to be a part of this team's future. Like, if you've solidified an interior spot on your offensive line, I think you're more than happy with that. I'm not sure if we have a question about it down here, though. I do want to hit on it, though, because where are we at on the status of the offensive line in terms of going into this game against Dallas?
Yeah, so it's gotten complicated, of course, with Lucas Patrick. He suffered that toe injury on Monday night, and he is on IR, so he's out for 4 games at least. So Sam Mustipher is going to be out there at the center spot, and then I was a little surprised when we got the first injury report this week, and Larry Borum was on there with a concussion.
Yeah.
So he's in the concussion protocol. We don't know if he's going to be cleared in time for this game or not. We also don't really know when exactly that happened. I assume it happened in the Monday night game, but he did not miss a single snap. And so you look at the depth chart, and I would fully expect if Larry Borum can't go, I would expect Riley Reef to be out there. I know people might want to see Alex Leatherwood, but I think they would go with the veteran guy who has all those starts under his belt. And yes, Leatherwood is a promising prospect, but you got some work to do with him still.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you were able to get a guy like Alex Leatherwood after just one season shows that there's some work, there's some rebuilding work to be done there. I think you're right. They will go with a veteran first. I'm pretty sure of that. And this is a reason why, particularly in this matchup. Robert says,
Yes.
I'm worried for Fields against the Cowboys rushers, especially with Whitehair and Patrick and possibly Borum with concussion. Yeah, this is a tough matchup for the Bears. It's a lot comes down to here is do they build on the offensive philosophy that we saw in this past week, Sean?
And can they do that if you're without Patrick and Borum and obviously Whitehair? I think this is going to be a much tougher challenge in terms of you just look at what Micah Parsons has done since he got into the league, and the pressure that the Cowboys are creating. It's really impressive. And I know Judon on New England is a really good pass rusher, but I don't know that he necessarily has the help that I don't know that the line as a whole is quite as good as what the Cowboys are bringing to the table. And that's going to be a tough one for the Bears.
It is. And Alan says, do you see this Baltimore Ravens style offense the way they go for the rest of the season? Sean, what do you think?
It wouldn't surprise me. Now that's gonna depend on every matchup is different, and what you're trying to attack with each team is different. And I really think that's how NFL coaches look at it. But I mean, we've seen in the past that when an NFL team figures something out that's working, they generally stick with it. We saw that with Matt Nagy a couple of years ago when they made that playoff run in 2020, and they basically changed the whole offense the last 6 weeks. We've seen that with other teams, and the way that these coaches, the first handful of weeks is really a feeling out process, and you learn what you're good at and what you're not. And I think that the Bears have done that, and they use that long break to figure out how they can adjust.
Well, what I think happened here is, and you're making a good point. Like the first part of the season, you're feeling out what you have, even if you're a veteran coaching staff. But this was a brand new coaching staff, a first time coaching staff, and Luke Getsy calling his own plays for the first time. What you saw happen here, Sean, was Luke came in with the offense he wanted to run, that he's run with Aaron Rodgers up there the last few years. And that kind of was the base of things, right? And it wasn't working. It wasn't working with the personnel that this Bears team currently have. And the coaching staff went out. They looked at teams around the league that run similar zone type systems, and they said, okay, what can we do to adjust our kind of base offense that we want to run in this scheme and match it with somewhere else that someone's running that will benefit Justin Fields and what we have personnel wise. And so, yeah, Alan, I do think that the Bears are going to continue to run this for the rest of the season. And to me, that's the most encouraging thing I've seen for this entire coaching staff, this new regime since they came in January. That is the most encouraging thing I've seen so far, is the way they made that adjustment during those 11 days. That should make you feel much better as a Bears fan.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Sorry. Oh, you know what? I need to mute myself.
No, you're good, Sean.
I'm choking over here. My bad. gotta get that cough out. Yeah, no, it's very encouraging, and I do expect that we'll see that. I don't know that we're going to see Justin Fields doing those design runs to that level every single game, but that's kind of just a game by game thing on what you see from the defense and really what's working for you against them once you get in the game.
Number one rushing team. That really sounds good. Yeah, I mean, the Bears, I think you're going to see really run heavy here, but in a way that is a way that, like I said, that it's run heavy that you see out of Baltimore, that you see out of Green Bay, where they're using that that run game to set up some play action pass and take more deep shots downfield. I mean, that's what Justin is really good at right now. It's he's still not great at reading the field past his first read. He did do better on Monday night, but if you can use the run game and the dynamic run game that you set up on Monday night to then use for some deep passing, that's going to put Justin Fields in the best position to succeed with this group.
I'm looking at the numbers on this Cowboys team. Through 7 games, as a team right now, they have 29 sacks. Kyle, off the top of your head, how many sacks do you think the Bears have?
How many sacks do the Bears have? I'm going to say about 9.
That's low. You're actually underselling them. They have 12.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, and you look at the sack rate in terms of percentage on passing plays specifically, and they're number 1 in the league. I mean, this is going to be a really tough test for this Bears offensive line, and especially if your starting right tackle remains out with a concussion, you're talking about trying to stop the best pass rushing defense in the league right now, and that's a tough task. And I think they might lean heavily on that run game, especially early, to get things going and to avoid having to drop Justin Fields back as much as possible early on in this game.
Let's see here. I'm losing my place. Throw this up quickly. Kawhi asks, what position is Leatherwood practicing at? Sean, do we know? I know it's pretty hard with us not seeing much of practice.
Yeah, we get to see the first 10 minutes or so. We don't ever get to see them even line up with their starting 11. So we're just reading it based off individual drills. To me, it looks like he's been working out at right tackle, just based off the drills that they're doing early on in practice. And I think long term, that's where you want him to be. He could potentially be at that right guard spot if Tevin were to get hurt or something. But I think they're looking at him as a right tackle and working towards that for down the line.
If you guys have more comments and questions here, throw them into the chat, trying to make sure I get all of them. But we got quite a few coming in still. So let's see, Sean, where should we go from here? We got this popping in. Dieter getting reps with the ones.
No, and I wouldn't expect that. I mean, they're going to stick with Sam Mustipher. I know he was benched last week, but he's still on paper right now. He's the best guy you got at that center spot, and they're going to stick with him while Lucas is out.
Sophisticated thoughts. I've always thought the offense should be a hybrid of the Ravens, Packers, and 49ers, but you have to understand it was strategic. The OC said he looked at things that were successful against New England.
Yeah, and that's they looked at what the Ravens did against the Patriots, and they said, hey, we can do some of that stuff. We got a quarterback who can do similar things. So now you look at it and you flip the script or flip the page and move on to the Cowboys, and you have to look at what teams have found success doing against them, and it's tough because this defense is really darn good.
Yeah, but I don't think that was just because they were playing the Patriots. I don't think the Bears offense is going to go back to what it looked like before those 11 days off.
No, I agree. I expect that they will continue to roll Justin Fields out, move the pocket side to side, and obviously some of those design runs, because he was doing that at a very low rate before this game, and that was easily his career high in rushing design runs. At least that's what Next Gen Stats said. Obviously, we don't always know what the play call is every single time, but just based off what you can tell on the tape.
Robert says Braxton seemed to work well with the wide run scheme and this new Fields Ravens thing. Yeah, Braxton Jones did perform pretty well in that game. Overall, the offensive line is not perfect by any means, but an improvement I felt like over the previous game against Washington, at least.
Yeah, and I think that Washington defensive line is really good. And
Yeah.
um, talking to Sam Mustipher after the game, he was like, "Well, he pointed that out. Like, yeah, we were going up against." He understood why he was benched, but he was also saying, well, we just played one of the best defensive lines in football. Those guys were really darn good, and of course you're going to get beat sometimes. And yeah, I think they handled this week much better. They were able to find a little bit more success. And I wasn't really all that impressed with that Patriots pass rush. Matthew Judon's really good, but outside of him, I don't know that anybody is necessarily gonna be a game changer.
Got about 10 minutes left, guys, before we wrap up here. Let's see. I had a question about the defensive line I wanted to get to. I'm trying to find it from Michael. After I said we had about 10 minutes left, I accidentally hit it and start running through. Here you go. Michael says, what do you guys think how the Bears D line fares without Robert Quinn? What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, so I'm glad we're talking about this. Going into that Patriots game, this is I'll get to the Robert Quinn stuff in a second, but I was surprised, Kyle, that the Patriots didn't try to just run the ball more. That they were, they got those issues. I don't want to say issues with the quarterback, but they got the uncertainty with their quarterbacks. And they didn't really, teams have been running up and down the Bears all season long, and they didn't really find any success doing that. And that to me was maybe the biggest surprise when I went back and watched that game.
Yeah, to me, you look at the way the Bears defense has set up with the secondary playing well. The Bears defense had been really bad against the run. I don't think that's going to change at any point this season. I just don't think they have the personnel right now to really be able to control the run. So I really like Ramondre Stevenson, Damian Harris. I don't like as much, but still, yeah, like a pretty good combination of backs there. I agree. I was a bit surprised to see them go away from that. We got a question or a comment about expecting the Cowboys to run the ball down the Bears' throat that I want to get to in a second. But before we do that, let's go back to this defensive line
Yeah.
this week. So, I mean, Travis Gibson, all you're going to see is snap count continue to rise there.
Yep.
Dominique Robinson. I mean, you need more out of Al-Qadim Muhammad. Definitely, I don't want to say he's been a bust. Like he's played fairly well, but I think you're looking for a little bit more out of him as well, Sean.
Yeah, you are looking for. I would expect him to get some more snaps too, and you haven't seen the finishes with Muhammad. We haven't seen the sacks. They just haven't been there. I expect Travis Gibson, Dominique Robinson, and Muhammad to get more snaps. Maybe Kingsley Jonathan is a guy who could get a few snaps here and there. He's a guy who was inactive for a couple of games earlier this season. Hasn't seen a ton of playing time, but they seem to be positive and think that he's earned some more reps, and we'll see what happens there. But certainly, this is Travis Gibson's time. He's gonna be the top guy, on this on the edge, and we've seen the flashes from him. He had 7 sacks last season. He's got a couple this season already, but it's time. This is his opportunity here. Robert Quinn is gone. See what he can do. Obviously, it's hard when you don't have a guy like Robert Quinn eating up double teams on the other side. It makes it tougher. Certainly, this move made the Bears' defensive line worse as far as right now this season, and that sucks. But you got some guys who you're excited about.
I threw this question or this comment up here, but there was a question earlier too about Kingsley Jonathan. I can't remember. I think was it Ryan Poles that mentioned him earlier this week?
He did mention him, yes.
Yeah, and I thought that was notable. One that he mentioned him, and the other thing I want to say here is I really appreciated the fact that Ryan Poles came out and spoke after that trade. That was something that we complained a ton about with Ryan Pace. Not only is it nice from a media standpoint, but it helps get your message out to the fan base. It makes you feel like your team is more connected to your fan base and to everything else. That was a really good job, I thought, by him to get out there. But outside of that, Sean, Kingsley Jonathan, what did you find that notable?
Oh yeah, anytime the GM is mentioning by name a guy who is, hardly played any snaps. I think he's appeared in 2 games this season. That's notable, and that's he's a guy who has a lot to prove. Obviously, yeah, he was with Buffalo during training camp, and the Bears picked him up right before the season, and I think part of the reason we haven't seen him was just because they had guys like Robert Quinn ahead of him. So maybe we'll get to see what he's all about, what he can bring to the table, and I do think he's going to get some opportunities.
I just had to block a sex bot in the chat, and it immediately made me think of having to block the our friend from Detroit, Don. If you remember, Sean, over the summer, I'm sure everyone in the chat does.
Don't say that. He might reappear.
I was like,
It's like a genie in a bottle or something.
He went a little quiet with the Detroit Lions not performing all that well this season.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's why he's quiet.
Yeah, he was pretty stoked and pretty adamant that they were in for a good year here. Let's see. Kawhi, I'm hopeful Velus Jones gets out of the doghouse and back in the offense, maybe returning kickoffs, not punts. What do you think?
I could see. I was a little surprised he wasn't doing kickoffs. I think I think it's okay to have one guy doing punts and one guy doing kickoffs, and he hasn't screwed up majorly on kickoff, so why not give him a couple more touches back there? I think it's a long season, and obviously Dante Pettis, dropped a punt there in that game, and luckily it bounced right back up to him. But that position is not set at this point, and I would not be surprised at all to see Velus Jones, getting an opportunity there later down the road.
He's gonna have to become a bit more involved in the offense. Like you talked him up too much in the offseason. The way, you got to see what you got in that kid, and I'm sure they're trying to evaluate in practice, but they're going to need to get some more tape of him in game situations before this season ends. And this isn't a situation where you're trying to win games anyway. So I expect that Velus over the second half of the season is going to become more involved in the offense. Let's see. Rick, this is a question for the chat, but someone had asked about Cole Kmet and some praise for him, or a higher praise. But question for the chat: what happens first, a Kmet touchdown, or we discover alien life? That's kind of rough, Rick. The lack of catches and red zone production from Cole Kmet is a bit concerning, I guess, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely concerning, and I know they lean heavily on the running backs down there in the red zone, but you got this big tight end who you've been talking up the entire offseason. He caught 60 balls last year, 600 yards, and I'm surprised that he hasn't been more of a target in the red zone, especially when you don't have an Allen Robinson type receiver who's going to be your go-to guy in that area. Yeah.
Let's see here. Okay, we're getting towards 50 minutes. Want to wrap it up here, and let's talk a little Cowboys before we do, Sean. Jailbreak had said Cowboys are a physical team, have to stay in your gap. And then earlier there was some talk in the chat about the run game and if Zeke was going to play. I'm not sure it matters if Zeke plays. We talked about this a little last year, and Hub was giving me a hard time because I love Tony Pollard. I think
you've been a Tony Pollard guy for 2 years.
I'm a Tony Pollard stan, and I think he's incredibly dynamic. I think Zeke is pretty much the exact opposite of Tony Pollard, and I hated when the Dallas Cowboys paid Zeke. So if I'm a Bears fan, I would actually be rooting for Zeke to play in this game because I think he's far less dynamic, and I'm willing to take the 3 yards per carry that he might give you over the chance of Tony Pollard breaking off a nice 30-yard run every time he touches the ball. But that's just me. I don't know.
If Zeke's out, then you're probably looking at a lot of touches for Pollard. So if that's a guy that you're afraid of, that's certainly not what you want. But yeah, Zeke has been on the injury report and hasn't practiced yet. Micah Parsons has also had an injury, but I'm not necessarily, if I'm a Cowboys fan, I'm not necessarily worried about that yet.
Before we wrap up, throw your prediction for Bears Cowboys in the chat. We're going to give ours here at the end. The one thing that throws me about this game against the Cowboys, it's clearly the Cowboys are the better team, right? But the Dallas Cowboys have a bit of a history over the last few years. Kyle, you're a Cowboys fan. That's absolutely not true. I see it. The Cowboys are to me a bit of an underachieving team a lot of time, and like that game against Detroit, it ended up being 24-6, but it was close for a good portion of that. It was 10-6 well into that game. Sorry, I want to say I called him Zach Prescott because someone in the chat earlier said Zach Prescott, and I was laughing at it. Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott was in his first game back. I do think this Cowboys offense should be better than it was last week, but like I said, they have a history of kind of underperforming. So I don't know. Maybe it's because of the fact that I just saw that from the Cowboys, and I just saw the Bears look the best that they've looked since 2018. But I think the Bears are going to be in this game on Sunday throughout it.
Yeah, I'm also encouraged by what we saw last week, and I'm much more. I would be much more concerned about this Cowboys defense than Dak in the offense. You know, did look a little rusty or Dak in particular looked a little rusty after missing however many games with that injury. Man, how about this? How did this Cowboys team? How did they weather this storm without Dak? That is one of the most impressive stories I think of this season so far in the NFL. That with Cooper Rush, they were able to keep this thing on the tracks long enough to get Dak back.
Well, it's for the one thing for the first time in quite a while. The Cowboys have a history of being really top heavy and not having enough depth on their roster. This is a deeper team than we've seen out of the Cowboys. They don't have as much frontline talent, but they're pretty stacked, and they have guys that can step into role when guys go down, and that helps. So maybe they're not as flashy, but they are more consistent, I would say.
Yeah, and so I do think Dak is going to get better with every game that he's back. You know, he's going to knock that rust off, and maybe that's this game, maybe that's another week from now. I do think the Bears are going to be able to keep this game close. I'm picking the Cowboys 24-21, but I think the Bears can hang around in this one.
My good friend Mike pops in with the Bears coaches just outsmarted Belichick, which means we have a monster coaching edge against Mike McCarthy. That's very true. Mike McCarthy does like to give games away. The talent gap is still too big here. And this defense is for the Cowboys is playing really well. I think the Bears are going to regress a bit from what we saw on Monday night. I'm going to take the Cowboys to win this game 24-17. Mostly though, I just want to see that offense continue to operate in the fashion that we saw, even if it regresses, if it doesn't work as well, if the offensive line struggles a bit with some of these guys out. I just want to see the Bears stick to what worked and try and build off of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a Bears fan, that's absolutely what you want, and I would be concerned if Larry Borum does miss this game with a concussion. You know, that's a lot of guys you're missing. That's 3 starters you're missing on that offensive line. And if that's the case, I might look at this as a little bit wider margin.
All right, that's a good reason to stick to ShawLocal.com and follow all of our Bears content over the next couple of days. We'll get you some injury updates. Sean will be out at Hallis Hall this afternoon. We'll have our preview content with you. We're going to go ahead and wrap up now, though, guys. We do appreciate everyone that was here today. It's awesome seeing all the comments come in. It makes this show go a lot quicker, a lot smoother for us to have all this to talk about. Everyone enjoy Bears Cowboys on Sunday. For Sean Hammond, I am Kyle Nabors. We will talk to you guys early next week.